Good morning. Today I'll be presenting a project that I completed this summer with Dr. Dave Gonzalez and my two doctoral supervisors, Dr. Pam Bryden and Dr. Roy. So motor planning has been described by Goen and Janssen and a variety of other researchers by converting a current state. So for example, when picking up a mug, my hand is by my side, and taking into consideration a desired state, so my hand should be on the mug, and programming a sequence of motor commands, so moving the arms and closing the fingers. As an infinite number of movement options are available to complete any given task, of particular interest is how an individual is constrained to perform a movement in a particular manner. So the end-state comfort effect has been used to assess behavioral evidence of advanced motor planning, defined as the tendency to maximize comfortable hand and arm postures at the end of simple object manipulation tasks rather than at the start. End-state comfort can be used to assess how an individual plans a movement prior to completing that movement. So for example, in a simple overturned glass task, so in order to pour water into a glass, adults are likely to assume an uncomfortable thumb-down posture at the start of their movement to facilitate a comfortable thumb-up posture at the end of their movement. And this is just one example of the end-state comfort effect. Other researchers have used traditional bar transport tasks and as well have incorporated other natural objects such as tools to study this phenomenon. The literature has shown that a variety of factors influence motor planning and end-state comfort. Looking at the influence of hand preference and developmental factors, in adults, a recent study with a CD transport task noted that more end-state comfort is displayed with the right hand, regardless of an individual's hand preference. In children, we see that end-state comfort is adult-like by the age of 9, where hand preference has been shown to constrain motor planning, such that right-handed children show more end-state comfort with their right hand, and left-handed children more end-state comfort with their left hand. Task characteristics have also been proven to be influential, such that familiar objects elicit more end-state comfort. So when comparing a neutral bar transport task to a natural overturned cup task, we see that end-state comfort and sensitivity to this effect appears earlier in children when manipulating an overturned cup, as opposed to interacting with the bar. And finally, although task intention has been not studied specifically with respect to the end-state comfort effect, traditional reach-to-grasp paradigms have demonstrated that the initial reach is influenced by the following action in terms of the kinematics of the movement. So for this study, we have two research questions. So does the task context influence end-state comfort in preferred and non-preferred hand reaching? And does the intended action influence movement kinematics in an end-state comfort paradigm? For the purpose of this talk, I will be focusing on the first research question, and Dave will be following up with the second research question in our next presentation. So for this study, we had 22 right-handed participants. This included adults between the ages of 18 to 25 and children between the ages of 6 and 8. We had all of our participants complete the Waterloo Handedness questionnaire and a cup manipulation task, which I'll be explaining further in the next few slides. So for those of you who aren't familiar with the Waterloo Handedness questionnaire, it's a self-report measure of handedness, which asks participants to indicate which hand they would prefer for a variety of new manual tasks, such as flipping pancakes and writing. They're offered 5 responses, so left hand always, left hand usually, uses each hand equally as often, right usually, or right always. And we can assign a number to these options, where an overall positive score gives us an indication of right-handedness, and an overall negative score indicates left-handedness. In order to complete the Waterloo Handedness questionnaire, we read the questions aloud to children, which has been done previously in research. In terms of our cup manipulation task, so participants sat with their hands in standard position and were instructed to complete all the movements in a designated location. In order to capture kinematic data and observational data, we used a combination of ObjTrack and video camera recording. So we had a one-camera ObjTrack setup. So in order to capture the movements, we had iRay markers affixed to the participants' wrists with a fin. And participants started with their hands at the starting location with their eyes closed. We had an E-prime program which provided the task instructions and a beep which signaled the start of the movement. So we had 4 different tasks for the purpose of this study. So our participants started with the pantomime without a stimulus task, where they were asked to close their eyes and provided information about the hand used to complete the task and the orientation of the cup that they would be imagining. And they were asked to demonstrate the action of picking up the cup as if to pour water. And after hearing the beep, they responded with a movement. Our next 2 tasks were counterbalanced between our participants. So either using an image of the cup as a guide to drive their movement, or the actual object as a guide to drive their movement, where again they were just pantomiming this movement. So participants closed their eyes, were given instructions on which hand to use, and the beep signaled a go, where they responded to the orientation of the object, so either upright or overturned. And in our final condition, participants actually interacted with the object. So again, they were provided information about which hand to use, a beep signaled to go, and they reacted to the orientation of the object. Based on the previous research, we measured the percentage of end-state comfortable grasps, where we had children complete 3 trials of each condition with each hand, and adults completed 5. So we hypothesized, considering all of our participants were right-handed, that we would see more end-state comfort with the right hand. Based on the amount of visual information, we hypothesized we would see more end-state comfort in the grasping condition in comparison to the pantomime and using the objects as a guide. And finally, that we would see more end-state comfort in adults than children. So this first figure collapses across all of my tasks, both hands used to complete the task, and shows that overall adults showed more end-state comfort than children. So the interesting thing to note here is that all of our right-handed participants, or all of our adults, showed 100% end-state comfortable grasp, regardless of which hand they were using. So this contrasts the previous study, who noted more end-state comfort with the right hand, regardless of hand preference. It's likely that our task, which incorporated a cup, was a very familiar object in comparison to the previous study, which used very complex CD transport tasks. It's likely that the familiarity with the object wasn't complex, so the task wasn't complex enough to really challenge this end-state comfort in our adult population. So moving into our comparisons between children and adults further, we saw that children showed less end-state comfort when using the image or cup as a guide. So it is likely due to the fact that how we presented our objects and how we presented the study. So in our pantomime condition, participants were provided information about both the hand used to complete the task and the orientation of the cup. However, when using the image and cup as a guide, they were only provided information about which hand to use. So it's likely that information about the orientation of the cup in the pantomime condition enabled them to pre-plan their movements, where using the image and cup as a guide, but they weren't actually interacting with the object, it took a little bit longer to plan their movements, which resulted in less end-state comfort. And it also speaks to the fact that interacting with an image or an object as opposed to actually grasping that object alters the way that we develop motor planning skills. So my next image shows that children show more end-state comfort with their left hand when using the image and cup as a guide. So this was a very surprising finding, considering the previous literature has shown that right-handed children are constrained by their hand preference in motor planning. According to the Waterloo Handedness Questionnaire, all of our children were very strong right-handers. So this finding warrants further investigation into how the development of handedness influences end state comfort in different task contexts. So just to tie everything together, within this study we saw that adults showed 100% end state comfortable grasp, regardless of which hand they were using or which task they were completing, which contrasts the previous literature. We saw that children showed more end state comfort with the upright cup, which was expected as there was no further manipulation required. However, children showed less end state comfort when using the image and cup as a guide, which is likely due to the way that the tasks were presented and the way that children learn by interacting with an object as opposed to just simply seeing an object. And finally, we saw that children showed more end state comfort with their left hand when using the image and cup as a guide. And considering this was a contrasting the previous literature, we'd like to look further into different strengths of handedness, and in particular left-handed children, to see how the role of the development of handedness really plays into end state comfort. So finally, the results suggest that indeed task context does influence the development of end state comfort, and that the influence of hand preference warrants further investigation. In terms of our implications, not only does it provide a greater understanding for our neurotypical development of the end state comfort effect, but this also provides a foundation for developmental disorders such as autism spectrum disorder and developmental coordination disorder, where these children typically have problems pantomiming movements and completing motor planning skills. As well, looking at more adult disorders in terms of apraxia and stroke. So thank you very much. I'd like to acknowledge my supervisors, Dr. Pam Bryden and Dr. Dave Gonzalez for all of this help with this project. Thank you very much.
So my colleague David Rosenbaum wouldn't like to see these kinds of findings, I think, because he likes to think that this end state comfort is a universal consequence of task. But I think you're showing that the task context plays a role, and there are other studies that have really shown that you don't get an end state comfort effect at all in certain circumstances. So there are even stronger manipulations here. Do you have any thoughts about whether you could drive within your framework to not get the comfort state effect at all?
To not get end state comfort?
Yeah.
I think that with children, the more complex we make the task, the less end state comfort we're going to see. So perhaps adding more sequences to the movement, we'll see that ability of the motor plane break down a lot earlier, and so they won't be able to plan that end state comfortable movement. So I think the simple tasks, children are better able to plan, but the more complex we make it, the more adult-like in nature we make the task, that we're going to see this end state comfort effect build down or break down earlier. And even in adults, if we present them with a very complex novel task, that could perhaps, break down the end state comfort as well.
So the end state comfort effect, if we push that further, is an interesting emergent correlation, but it's not necessarily a feature in planning or whatever, if you want to take that way of looking at the world.
And just to add to that, we actually have tested left-handed in adults, and they show interesting results. We had someone that's actually ambidextrous, and she showed about 80% of the time she did not have end state comfort. So even in a simple task like this, some adults are doing really weird things.
I may have missed this, but did you try this task with pictures rather than actually going through the manipulation? If you asked somebody to select a picture of how they would do it, would there be an end state comfort effect?
We've not looked at that yet. So right now we're just seeing whether or not interacting with an image would elicit the end state comfort effect. But we could definitely look at, show images of an end state comfortable graph or an end state or not end state comfortable graph, and see if that alters the way that children perceive or comfortable movements. It's definitely some way that we can take this
Because
project.
it could tell you whether it's built into the